for the last part of this, where are we going in the future? I think that it's really interesting. Again, how are we going to make a difference? You have 5 approved biosimilars for trastuzumab, and let's assume for a minute that all of the, just for whatever, the complicated 340B issues, the patient, support system issues are all roughly similar. How are you going to choose? How are you going to choose?
Adam, I go back to my initial comment that we need to have supply that's uninterrupted, patient assistance program, payer coverage, and support for education. Any vendor that does all these 4 things, I would be very happy to work with them.
Do you think all vendors do that now or not?
Probably there's a variation in that.
So
there's a small variation in each of them, and that's why we probably would prefer one over the other. Right. And again, I think these are the important, very critical part of that. But the way I look at it is the biosimilars, the fact that large companies came into manufacturing them has really made me optimistic that we can address the drug price. If you go back and look at Rand Corporation's report and prediction, they expect that with the complete assimilation of biosimilars in the therapeutic space, that includes oncology, autoimmune disease, GI, urology, our health system can save anywhere between $24 billion to $150 billion in 10 years. And I'm optimistic now when we look at the uptake of the new biosimilars in the oncologic space. It's been very encouraging.
Yeah. No, and again, for someone who comes from an OCM, probably a more intense OCM than we have, it's interesting because, if you're going to get a global payment, won't biosimilar, the savings you're making biosimilars, allow you to use novel originators for other indications? In other words,
exactly.
That's the point. That's the beauty of this.
Exactly.
Is that it allows you to use that brand new IO, that maybe will work really well.
And then I'll save back on the biosimilar space. So, that's exactly, I think it allows me option of adapting more expensive drug for people that need it most.
Correct. Now, do you use pathways? I don't know if you guys are a VIA. You're not VIA.
We were VIA at some stage because we had a pilot with commercial Blue Cross Blue Shield, so we had VIA in our clinic.
Right.
We still pay for monthly subscription even now.
Oh, really? Nice. Well, it's not VIA. It's called ClinPath, by the way.
Yeah,
so it's Elsevier bought it. It's ClinPath, right?
Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, but now with having gone to OCM, the requirement is we should use guideline-based therapy. So we primarily rely on NCCN guidelines. Got it. And we use NCCN evidence block as a support tool to find out least expensive, equally effective option.
So does we're not NCCN, we're not an NCCN institution. So does the NCCN now substitute biosimilar? Do they say that in their guidelines now or not?
They do say, I think, they don't kind of, they don't recommend one versus the other, but they're part of, yeah.
So in ClinPath / VIA, we're trying to do that now. I think that, we are thinking about, right now it just says trastuzumab, and it's likely we'll say, I think it's getting to the point where it's going to say biosimilar, or trastuzumab with the 4 letters at the end.
4 letters, yeah.
Right, whatever, but it's not, as you said, it's going to be agnostic, because again, it really is going to depend on the payer mix in that part of the country, the degree of 340B in that part of the country, that sort of thing is going to be very interesting. So you can't, now that VIA or ClinPath is all national, it's like 2,000 oncologists, oncologists, say, in the Pacific Northwest are different than in Pittsburgh in terms of their payer mix and California, et cetera. So it's going to be really interesting, but we're agnostic about which one. But I think we're moving towards saying biosimilar instead of the originator. Yeah, so we're trying to do that. So the other thing is that, where are we going with biosimilars? The 2 things, at least in breast cancer, that are interesting, probably in lung cancer too, and some of the other cancers, is one thing we're concerned a little bit about is combining a biosimilar with an originator that's still on patent. And the example in breast cancer is combining biosimilar trastuzumab with pertuzumab, originator pertuzumab. How have you guys handled that in ION and your practices?
Well, I think I can talk about my practice because, we adapted quickly, and we've taken a leap of faith in the FDA's approval process. Now, again, there's a little bit of gray area because we really don't know what that combination is going to do. Yeah. But if it's approved for any indication that the main compound is approved for, we will go with whatever it's been FDA label says.
So it's whatever the FDA label says, okay. Yeah. All right, yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think, we're still struggling. Again, because it takes it to another level, because now, you need data, and I'm sure there is going to be data. There are going to be data that's going to come out, at least for breast cancer, with the biosimilar Traz, with originator pertuzumab, et cetera. And plus there are people developing biosimilar pertuzumabs, but those are still in the pipeline.
And that's where actually the real world evidence data will help, because if the pharma company proactively starts collecting data, that will be a huge leap forward.
Because we'll actually know pretty quickly how many people are using biosimilar trastuzumab with pertuzumab. We'll know it because usually where that's used, at least initially, is in neoadjuvant chemotherapy for breast cancer. So, I mean, it'll be very interesting to see what happens. The other thing that's kind of interesting, that it's going to be a little bit harder to use. I mean, I said this in breast cancer, this is going to be the decade of the antibody drug conjugate.
Of course.
With Enhertu's approval, and now there's going to be a bunch of other ones in breast. To make a biosimilar ADC, that's going to be really interesting to see how that's going to work. I don't know how that's going to work. I mean, I guess you can't really make one, because you can't, because you got a generic drug usually. You've got a kind of the biosimilar trastuzumab, at least in the case of breast. It'd be really interesting to see. I guess you probably would never be able to develop those, But anyway, it's interesting. So, do you have any idea about newer biosimilars that are coming on the market, things that are in the pipeline that you're interested in?
Well, anything that comes out, I think right now we have all the 3 drugs out in the market. I think the rituximab, the trastuzumab, and then biosimilars. And I'm hoping that we get more and more choices, because as a society, again, we can't have the kind of sustained rise in the drug prices that's going to threaten the viability of the system as a whole. So I think the next way, maybe when the IOs get off the patent in maybe 4 or 5 years from now, I think that probably will look at the, all the different IO compounds. I'm sure in 5 years that probably will be another wave. But between now and then, I think we've maxed out on most of the biologics in terms of the oncology space.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think at least for now, because the brand new biologics we have no idea about. But again, I think it's really important to emphasize, at least for me, don't go chasing 100%.
No.
The low-hanging fruit is 80%. That's what we learned in VIA, is that it's 80%. Chasing that last 20% is just too hard. It's not worth the amount of effort you have to put in to get rid of it.
And it's absolutely right. I think, again, going back to perfect example of a patient who needs on-body injector because it drives 4 hours, even if I end up in losing $1,000, I will use it because we became doctor not to make someone's suffering more, we became doctor to help them in the best possible way.
I completely agree with you. I think that's a good area to kind of sum this up. And so again, I think this has been extremely informative. Before we end this discussion, I'd like to open up to Dr. Patel and ask him any final thoughts he may have on this.
Well, Adam, thank you for such a kind of delightful and then very provoking conversation. I'm seeing biosimilar as a trustee and steward of the society. I don't see myself as just somebody who writes with a pen. We have been given collective responsibility of public trust fund. In my lifetime, I'll be spending about $200 to $400 million of public funding in my practice. And if I don't spend it conservatively, I'm failing my duty as a steward of the society. And I want to see that Medicare has a fund for my great-grandchildren because I'm invested in this country. And that's why I look at biosimilar as a ray of optimism to ensure that society can sustain the healthcare the way it is right now.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's actually, a really good way of ending this. I think that as physicians, clearly the individual patient is the most important thing.
Absolutely.
The patient in front of us. But on the other hand, as part of that, if we had a system that's bankrupted, then we couldn't give the patient anything at all. And I think we do have a responsibility to be sure that with the public trust, with the public funds, that we're able to kind of manage them as efficiently as we can. And this is a way to deliver care without compromise, really. Being able to get it. I mean, there are areas of the world that don't even have these drugs. And clearly this is actually good for them as well. But to be able to do that. So anyway, I'd like to thank you for your contributions to the discussion. On behalf of our panel, we thank you for joining us. And we hope this peer exchange discussion has been useful and informative.